He thought he was just rescuing a drowning woman. But that moment on the beach changed everything. What followed was not only love, but a home built on the simplest joys. Share your thoughts below. And don't forget to hit subscribe so you never miss the next story. The waves at Cannon Beach had been rough all morning, rolling higher than usual, their white crests crashing against the rocks with a steady roar. Ethan Walker had brought his 6-year-old daughter, Mia, for what was supposed to be a quiet day by the shore. A little sandcastle building, maybe flying the small kite she carried everywhere. But then he saw her, dark hair tangled in the surf, body limp, drifting where the water met the sand. His heart lurched without a second thought. He dropped his jacket, sprinted into the waves, and pulled her toward land. Mia's scream pierced the air. "Daddy, she's not moving." Her small hands clutched at his wet shirt, her eyes wide with terror. Ethan knelt in the cold sand, ignoring the sting of salt water dripping down his face. His chest pounded, his breath uneven, but his hands were steady as he tilted the stranger's head back, checked her airway, and began compressions. 1, 2, 3. Breathe. His voice shook as he barked for someone nearby to call for help, but his eyes never left the woman's pale face. Is she going to die? Mia's voice quivered, her tiny fist trembling against his arm. Ethan forced his own fear down. No, sweetheart, she's not. He prayed those words would hold true because he wasn't sure himself. His palms pressed against her sternum, rhythm relentless, every count a plea. Then suddenly a gasp. Water burst from her lips. Her body jolted as if startled awake. She coughed violently at first, then drew in a shaky breath. Relief crashed over Ethan like another wave. He fell back on his heels, chest rising and falling as if he just surfaced from the ocean himself. The woman blinked, dazed, her voice. What? What happened? Ethan steadied her by the arm. You were drowning, he said softly, though his words carried the weight of what could have been. You blacked out. I pulled you out. Mia edged closer, still clinging to Ethan, but unable to take her eyes off the stranger. Her little voice was almost a whisper. You scared me. The woman turned her head, her face pale but her gaze gentle. She reached out with trembling fingers, brushing Mia's hand as if it were the most natural thing to do. I'm sorry, sweetheart. I didn't mean to. Ethan draped a towel from his bag over her shoulders, his touch firm but careful. You should be checked at the lifeguard station, he said, his voice low. Protective. She nodded slowly, then looked at him as though remembering something vital. My name is Lauren, she murmured, her lips curving faintly despite the chill. And just like that, Mia slipped her small hand into Lauren's, gripping it tightly as if she had known her forever. Ethan glanced at the sight, his daughter's fragile trust meeting a stranger's weary strength, and something unspoken flickered in his chest on that windswept shore. With the tide pulling back and the gulls circling above, the three of them stood together, not yet knowing how much this single moment would change the rest of their lives. By the time the paramedics at the lifeguard station assured them Lauren would be fine, the sun had begun to dip behind the jagged cliffs of Cannon Beach. Ethan was gathering their things when Mia tugged at his sleeve, eyes shining with determination. Daddy, can she come to dinner with us? Her voice was innocent, yet carried a weight Ethan couldn't brush aside. He hesitated. It wasn't exactly what he'd planned for the evening. Their routine was simple, predictable, takeout in their small Portland apartment. Mia's drawings scattered across the table, the comfort of the ordinary. But Mia wouldn't let it go, her hand gripping his firmly. She needs food. You always say food makes everything better. Lauren started to protest, her tone gentle but distant. That's sweet, but I don't want to intrude. She looked so out of place, wrapped in the towel, damp hair clinging to her cheeks, yet there was a flicker in her eyes, almost like she wanted to say yes. Ethan scratched the back of his neck, his voice low. It's nothing fancy, just pasta. He surprised himself by adding, You'd be welcome. For a moment, silence hung between them, broken only by the crash of waves. Then Lauren nodded, her smile faint but real. 20 minutes later, she sat at their kitchen table, the towel replaced by one of Ethan's hoodies that swallowed her frame, sleeves falling past her wrists. The apartment smelled of garlic and tomatoes simmering on the stove. It wasn't much, a 2-bedroom rental with creaky floors and chipped paint, but it was warm, lived in, and filled with Mia's laughter. She proudly laid her crayon drawings in front of Lauren, explaining each dinosaur with dramatic flair. Lauren listened as if every scribbled line were a masterpiece, her smile soft, her attention unwavering. Ethan leaned against the counter watching. There was something striking about her, not just the dark hair still damp from the sea, but the way she leaned in close to Mia, the way she made his daughter's little stories feel important. He stirred the pasta, poured cheap red wine into mismatched glasses, and caught himself noticing how natural she looked sitting there, as though she belonged. When dinner was served, Lauren accepted the steaming bowl and glass of wine without complaint, lifting them with quiet gratitude. "This is wonderful," she said, her voice carrying more weight than the words themselves. Ethan gave a short laugh. "It's just pasta." But she shook her head. "No, it feels like home." For a while, the three of them ate together, conversation flowing in easy rhythms. Mia filled the room with chatter about school and her favorite books. Lauren asked questions, not politely but curiously, as though she genuinely wanted to know. And Ethan, he found himself listening to the sound of their voices intertwining, wondering how a stranger could slip so seamlessly into the spaces of his life. When the plates were cleared and Mia began to yawn, Lauren stood, pulling the oversized hoodie tighter around her. Outside, a sleek black car waited, its engine humming softly against the quiet street. She bent to hug Mia, her whisper tender. "Thank you for dinner, sweetheart." Mia's eyes lifted. "Hopeful, you'll come back, right?" Lauren hesitated, then glanced at Ethan. "If your dad lets me." He opened the door, his voice steady. "You're welcome anytime." She paused at the threshold, turning back one last time. Her gaze held his, something unspoken, flickering in the dim kitchen light. "You saved my life tonight," she murmured. Her words lingered, almost a confession, not just from the water, but when I needed to be saved. Ethan's chest tightened, unsure what to say, unsure why those words unsettled him the way they did. Then she was gone, stepping into the night, the door clicked shut, leaving behind the faint echo of her voice and the undeniable sense that this dinner, this small, ordinary evening, was anything but ordinary. 3 days passed, and Ethan tried to push the memory of that night into the background, but it lingered. The sound of Lauren's voice at his kitchen door, the way Mia had clung to her hand, the quiet weight of her words. "You saved me when I needed to be saved." He told himself it had been a single evening, an interruption in their simple rhythm. Yet every time Mia drew a new picture, she asked if they could show it to Lauren. Every time Ethan reached for the jar of pasta, he remembered how she had smiled over their mismatched glasses of wine. By the third morning, he was back on site, hammer in hand, sweat beading across his brow as the old brownstone creaked under the strain of repair. Dust clung to his shirt, the air filled with the scent of sawdust and plaster. He was halfway through installing drywall when his phone buzzed, number unknown for a second. He considered ignoring it, then something in his chest told him to answer. "Ethan Walker," he said, pressing the phone to his ear. There was a pause, then a voice, soft, careful, and immediately familiar. "It's Lauren, from the beach." His heart jolted in a way he hadn't expected. "Yeah, I remember. I was hoping I could talk to you." Her tone carried hesitation, as though she wasn't used to asking for anything. Ethan wiped his dusty hands on his jeans, glancing around the unfinished room. "Now's not great. I'm on a job. Then I'll come to you." He blinked. "Surprised? You don't even know where I am." "Text me the address, please." An hour later, a black SUV rolled up to the curb, gleaming against the grid of the neighborhood. Ethan stepped outside, arms crossed, dust still clinging to his hair. Lauren emerged, dressed in tailored slacks and a silk blouse that looked impossibly out of place among the cracked sidewalks and piles of nails. Yet she walked with purpose, careful where she placed her heels, as though determined not to let the contrast define her. "You didn't have to come all this way," Ethan said, pulling off his gloves. "I wanted to." She looked around the site, her gaze moving across the exposed beams and broken windows. "Is this what you do full-time when the work's steady?" he replied. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "I came to thank you properly. That night, I wasn't thinking clearly. I left too quickly. I never asked if you were okay." Ethan leaned against the frame of the door, studying her. I was fine, not shaken, not even a little. He looked down at his callous hands. I've seen worse. Something flickered in her eyes, but she didn't press. Instead, she drew a quiet breath. Would you let me take you and Mia out to dinner? He raised an eyebrow. You tracked me down just to offer dinner. She gave a small laugh, almost embarrassed. I know how that sounds. Maybe I feel guilty. Or maybe, she hesitated, then met his gaze. Maybe I just want to see you both again for a moment. Ethan said nothing. Ethan. The city hummed around them, a car horn in the distance, the scrape of wood against metal. He thought of Mia's face when she'd asked if Lauren would come back. He thought of the way Lauren had listened, really listened, at their little kitchen table. Finally, he exhaled slowly, a wry smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. All right, dinner. Her shoulders eased, relief softening her features. Saturday night, Saturday works, he said, brushing plaster dust from his shirt. But fair warning, it won't be a steakhouse. Lauren's smile widened, something genuine breaking through the polish. Good. I wasn't thinking steakhouse anyway. And just like that, the door to something more creaked open, fragile, but undeniable. Right there on the steps of an old Portland brownstone. Saturday came with skies clear enough to make Portland feel softer than usual. The kind of day when families spilled into parks, music drifted through the air, and food trucks lined the streets like a carnival. Ethan wasn't sure why he'd agreed. Maybe it was Mia's excitement. Maybe it was the way Lauren's voice had carried something more than guilt when she asked. Whatever the reason, he found himself walking hand in hand with his daughter toward the chaos of Lincoln Park. Lauren was already there, waiting near a taco stand, her hair loose and windswept, a cup of lemonade in each hand. She looked nothing like the woman he'd pulled from the water, and yet somehow exactly the same, polished but present, out of place but unbothered. When Mia spotted her, she broke free from Ethan's hand and raced forward. Lauren crouched down to meet her, offering the lemonade with a grin. I already found the best churros. Want to help me find the worst hot dog? Mia giggled, nodding with the kind of energy only a 6-year-old could carry. Ethan caught up, shaking his head as he took the second cup. You don't seem like the kind of person who eats food off a paper plate. Lauren's smile tilted, amused. You don't seem like the kind of man who installs drywall with perfect seams. But here we are. They moved through the rows together, sampling tacos, fries, sliders, and more. Mia leading the charge with wide eyes and sticky fingers. Every stand they stopped at. Mia insisted on a score out of 10. Lauren played along, dramatic in her delivery, declaring one taco a 6.5 because it dripped salsa on her sleeve, and another a 9 because it made her eyes water from spice. Ethan watched her laugh when Mia dared her to bite into a ghost pepper slider, her eyes watering as she fanned her face with the flimsy paper tray. For a moment, she wasn't the poised woman in designer clothes. She was just someone willing to be messy, to be real. Later, after Mia ran off to chase bubbles with a crowd of kids near the fountain, Ethan and Lauren found a quieter spot beneath the string lights. He studied her for a moment, arms folded across his chest. You always have a driver waiting, tailored suits, expensive shoes, and you don't exactly blend in at a food truck festival. She glanced down at the grass, then back at him. I didn't tell you the other night because I didn't want you to look at me the way most people do. Her voice softened. My father built hotels, a whole chain of them. When he died last year, he left everything to me. And suddenly, everyone stopped seeing me as a person and started seeing me as a bank account. The words hung heavy in the air. Ethan didn't flinch, didn't lean closer, didn't back away. He just let the silence stretch before speaking. I don't need your money. Lauren, I know, she whispered, her eyes holding his. Across the park, Mia's laughter rang out as she spun in circles with the bubbles, carefree and oblivious to the weight of adult truths. Ethan followed the sound for a moment, then looked back at Lauren. There was something in her gaze, a plea, maybe, or the quiet relief of finally being seen. The night wound down with sticky fingers, tired giggles, and a promise of churros to take home as Ethan lifted Mia into his arms, her head dropping to his shoulder. Lauren walked beside him, no longer the stranger he'd pulled from the ocean, not just the woman who'd sat at his kitchen table. She was something else now, something he wasn't ready to name, but couldn't ignore. And as the festival lights flickered against the dark, He knew this wasn't going to be the last time she asked to see them. The following Sunday, the three of them met again, this time at the Oregon Coast Aquarium. Mia had begged all week, clutching the crumpled brochure Lauren had given her at the food festival as if it were a golden ticket. She bounced on her toes at the entrance, tugging Ethan's hand while her eyes scanned the glass walls that shimmered with shifting blue light. Lauren arrived in sneakers and a navy coat, her hair pulled back into a braid that softened her usual elegance. She bent down to Mia's level, her voice warm. "I heard there's a giant octopus inside. Do you think we'll find it?" Mia gasped, nodding furiously, then pulled both adults toward the gates as though the sea itself couldn't wait. Inside, the aquarium pulsed with life. Stingrays gliding like kites, schools of silver fish swirling as if they shared one thought. Mia darted from tank to tank, her palms pressed flat against the glass, narrating everything she saw with uncontainable excitement. Lauren kept pace easily, crouching beside her, pointing out the sharp teeth of a shark or the fluttering grace of a jellyfish. Ethan trailed a few steps behind, his eyes drawn not just to the creatures in the water, but to the picture they made together. His daughter's trust, Lauren's laughter, the simple way they seemed to belong in each other's company. At the jellyfish exhibit, the light shifted into an otherworldly glow, casting golden ripples across their faces. Ethan stood with his arms loosely crossed, watching Mia tap in rhythm to the pulse of the translucent creatures. Lauren moved closer, her voice low. "She's a smart kid, too smart sometimes," Ethan replied, rubbing the back of his neck. She turned her gaze to him, steady and unflinching. "You're doing a good job with her." His chest tightened. Compliments always sat uneasily. "Most days, I'm just trying not to mess her up." Lauren hesitated, then asked gently, "Her mom?" The words hung between them heavy, but not prying. Ethan stared at the glowing tank, his voice even, but flat. "She left. No big fight, no lawyers, just a note on the fridge and her keys on the counter. Mia was too." Lauren's eyes softened. "You must have been furious." He shook his head. "I didn't have time for fury. I had a toddler to feed and a job to find." Numb was easier for a moment. Silence filled the space between them, broken only by the hum of water filters. Then Lauren spoke, her voice quieter than the ripple of the tanks. "My mother left too. I was 9. She said she couldn't breathe in my father's world, so she went to find herself. She sent postcards the first year. After that, nothing." Ethan turned to her, searching her face. "I'm sorry." Lauren gave a faint smile, though her eyes glistened. "I stopped waiting for the mailman when I was 10. The weight of her confession pressed against him, not because it shocked him, but because it mirrored his own. Two people, shaped by absence, standing in front of a glass wall of fragile creatures that survived by drifting together. Just then, Mia came running back, her small hand grabbing Lauren's. "There's a penguin feeding in 5 minutes. Hurry." Lauren laughed softly, squeezing the girl's fingers. "Lead the way." She glanced at Ethan as Mia tugged them forward. Her smile was small, but it carried something deeper, something unspoken. Ethan walked beside them, shoulders brushing, and for the first time in a long while, he felt the sharp edge of the past dull just slightly. In its place was something fragile, unexpected, and quietly hopeful. The weeks after the aquarium seemed to slip by in quiet rhythm, but something had changed. Lauren no longer felt like a visitor who had stumbled into their lives. She returned again and again, sometimes with board games tucked under her arm, sometimes with tickets to a puppet show Mia had seen in a flyer at school. She never stayed long, never overstayed. Yet, her presence filled the apartment in ways Ethan hadn't realized were missing. Mia grew used to the sound of her knock, the sweep of her coat as she stepped inside, the way she always bent first to greet the child before even glancing at Ethan. "What masterpiece did you draw today?" she'd ask, and Mia would beam, running off to fetch a crayon-scribbled dinosaur or a castle with stars scattered above. Ethan often stood back, watching, part of him wary, part of him unable to ignore how easily Lauren carved a place in the corners of their routine. Then came the night of the snow. Portland rarely froze so heavily, but that evening, Flakes drifted thick against the streetlights, settling on rooftops and fire escapes in muffled silence. Ethan had just coaxed Mia into brushing her teeth when a knock sounded at the door. He opened it to find Lauren, cheeks flushed from the cold, her coat dusted white. She held up a paper bag with a shy smile. "I brought soup. A place in Lincoln Square makes it supposedly. The chef sings while he stirs." He stepped aside, shaking his head with quiet amusement. "You really don't need to do this." "I wanted to," she replied simply, unwrapping her scarf. "Besides, Snow calls for soup from down the hall." Mia's voice rang out. "Who is it?" A second later, she bounded into the kitchen in rocket ship pajamas, eyes lighting up when she saw Lauren. "Did you bring donuts?" Lauren crouched, brushing a strand of hair from Mia's forehead. "Better soup, but I'll trade you a bowl for a bedtime story." Mia grinned. "Only if it's the dragon one." "Deal." Ethan leaned against the counter, arms folded as Lauren followed Mia down the hall. He listened to her voice lift and fall, spinning tales of a dragon who guarded a hidden mountain, and to the peals of his daughter's giggles breaking through the walls. Something inside him tightened and softened at once. It had been years since laughter like that filled the space before bedtime. When Lauren returned to the kitchen, her expression was quieter, thoughtful. She slipped off her coat, her hair damp from melting snow. For a moment, she just stood there, the paper bag of soup on the counter between them, until she spoke softly. "He asked me something tonight." Ethan raised a brow. "What's that?" She smiled faintly, almost sheepishly. "He asked if I was your girlfriend." His breath caught. He hadn't expected that. "And what did you say?" Lauren held his gaze, her voice calm but certain. "I told him I wasn't yet, but that I wanted to try, really try." The silence that followed wasn't heavy, but charged. Outside, snow pressed against the windows, blanketing the city in white. Inside, Ethan felt the ground shift beneath him, an unspoken acknowledgement that they were no longer dancing around chance meetings or polite gestures. This was the beginning of something that might actually matter. He reached for the soup, more to steady himself than anything else. "Well," he said, his voice low, almost a whisper. "I guess snow has a way of changing things." Lauren's smile lingered, soft and sure, and in that small kitchen filled with warmth and falling snow, a family was quietly, unmistakably beginning to take shape. Winter in Portland pressed on, the kind that seeped into old windows and made Ethan check the heater twice a night. Work had slowed, but one evening the call came. A developer he knew offered him a contract. Long-term, steady, twice his usual rate, a hotel downtown, full renovation, months of work. It was the kind of job he couldn't turn away from, the kind of job that would change things for Mia. But the thought of late nights and endless hours pulled at him like an undertow. He told Lauren about it over takeout. Cartons of lo mein spread across the coffee table. Mia was building a Lego tower nearby, humming softly to herself. Ethan's words came carefully. "Heavy. It's good money, but it's a lot of hours. I'd need help. Real help." Lauren set down her chopsticks, meeting his eyes without hesitation. "Then let me help." He searched her face, unsure if she understood. Not just visits and fun weekends, early mornings, parent-teacher meetings, laundry that never ends. All of it. Her answer was simple. "I know, and I want all of it." At first it felt strange, almost fragile, this shift from visits to daily life. But soon, routines began to bend around her presence. Lauren insisted on handling school pickups when Ethan worked late. She folded laundry with Mia perched beside her on the couch, even if she never quite figured out how to match socks. She tried cooking one night, burning a grilled cheese so badly that Mia wrinkled her nose before declaring it's still kind of awesome. They laughed until tears ran down their cheeks, and Ethan realized the mistakes mattered less than the effort. There were rough edges, too. Lauren's car was too polished for the cracked lot at Mia's school. Ethan worried about whispers, about her world colliding with his too quickly. But when Mia's hand slipped easily into hers, when Lauren crouched to tie a shoelace or clapped from the bleachers at a school play, those worries dulled. She wasn't trying to replace anything. She was simply showing up, and that made all the difference. Late one night, Ethan returned home after hours at the site, exhaustion heavy in his bones. He pushed open the door to find the living room warm with lamplight. Mia was asleep on this couch, a blanket tucked around her, and Lauren sat beside her with a book open across both their laps. She looked up, finger pressed to her lips, and Ethan just stood there, the weariness melding into something quieter, something he hadn't let himself feel in years. Later, when Mia was carried to bed and the apartment grew still, Ethan lingered in the kitchen. "You don't have to do all this," he said softly. Lauren shook her head. "I don't have to. I want to." The words landed with a weight he couldn't shake. For years he had carried everything alone, convinced it was the only way forward. And now here she was, burning sandwiches, folding shirts inside out, making mistakes that didn't matter because they were hers, because she was choosing to be here. In the quiet of that night, Ethan realized this was what balance looked like. Not perfect, not polished, but two people learning to hold the weight together, and for the first time in a long time, he let himself believe it might just last. The snow had only just begun to melt when Ethan asked Lauren to drive with him. He didn't say where. He only told her to dress warm. The morning was pale, the kind of light that made Portland's edges feel softer, as though the whole city was holding its breath. She sat beside him in the truck, quiet, watching the highway curve west until the land opened and the ocean spread wide before them. Cannon Beach was nearly empty that day, the sand damp and dark, the waves rolling in with steady rhythm. Ethan parked near the dunes, hands tightening on the wheel for a moment before he spoke. This is where it started. Lauren stepped out into the wind, pulling her coat close, her hair whipping across her face. Ethan joined her, boots sinking into the sand as he gestured toward the water. "Back when it was just me and Mia. I used to come here when I didn't know what I was doing, when everything felt too heavy." He paused, his gaze on the tide. It was the only place I could breathe. She looked at him, then her eyes steady, the cold flush on her cheek softening the sharp lines of her face. "You don't have to carry it all anymore," she said quietly. He turned toward her, his voice low, almost hesitant. "I don't have a ring, Lauren. Not yet, but I've got a toolbox full of things I can build, and I want to build something with you, with Mia, something that lasts." The words hung in the air, simple and unpolished, but they carried more weight than any diamond could. Lauren's eyes shimmered, tears caught in the salt air. She nodded, her voice breaking just slightly. "You already have for a moment." They stood there, the world narrowing to the sound of surf and the rush of the wind. Then Ethan reached for her, pulling her close as their lips met. Slow, certain, unhurried. It wasn't the kind of kiss meant for an audience. It was a promise carved into the cold air, sealed by the rhythm of the waves behind them. The gulls circled, their cries sharp against the sky. The tide swept forward, erasing footprints as fast as they were made. Yet in that fragile moment, something permanent settled between them. Not a grand gesture, not champagne or chandeliers, just a man who had built his life on grit and resilience, offering what he knew best, his steady hands, his willingness to try. His heart laid open on the sand when they finally stepped back. Lauren laughed softly, brushing the tears from her lashes. "Only you would propose with a toolbox." Ethan smiled, a rare, unguarded smile that reached his eyes. "It's what I know, and it's enough if you want it." She reached for his hand, lacing her fingers through his. "It's more than enough." They walked along the shoreline, their coats tugged by the wind, the ocean endless before them. And though the beach was the same place where fear and uncertainty had once nearly stolen her life, it was now a place of beginning, a reminder that sometimes the strongest promises are the simplest ones, spoken with sand beneath your feet and the future wide open ahead. The following spring, the city seemed to shimmer with newness. Ethan had never been one for tuxedos or ballroom lights, but when Lauren asked him to stand with her at the Bennett Foundation Gala, he couldn't say no. "It's the first one since my father passed," she'd said, her fingers intertwined with his on their worn couch. "I want you there. Not for the donors, for me." So there he was, shoulders squared in a rented suit that fit well enough, standing in the back of the grand hall while chandeliers glowed like stars overhead. The air was thick with perfume and polished laughter, the kind that came from people who'd never once worried about rent. Ethan felt like a misplaced puzzle piece in the glittering scene. But across the room, Lauren moved with practiced grace, her midnight gown catching the light, her smile easy but never empty. She glanced toward him often, eyes finding his through the crowd, and each time the knot in his chest loosened just a little. At one point, she slipped away from a circle of donors and crossed to him, her hand sliding into his. "You stayed," she whispered with a small smile. "I thought about leaving." He admitted still might if someone offers me foie gras again. Her laugh was soft, private, meant only for him. "You look good in a tux. No one's ever said that to me. Then I'll be the first." She led him through a side door into a smaller room lined with framed renderings and architectural boards. She stopped before one, her eyes bright. "This is what I wanted to show you." Ethan stepped closer, studying the plans. Open floor space, a gym, computer labs, light spilling through tall windows. "What is this?" "The new project," she said. "A community center here in Portland. After-school programs, job training, a safe place for kids who need it." She turned to him, her voice steady. "I want you to build it." He blinked, the weight of her words settling heavily in his chest. "Me, I trust you," she said simply. "You care about people. You don't cut corners. You know what it means to build something that lasts, not just something that looks good on paper. This isn't charity. Ethan, it's legacy, and I want you to lead it." For a long moment, he didn't speak. The man who had spent years patching drywall and hustling for odd jobs could hardly reconcile this. The faith in her voice, the certainty in her eyes. Finally, he nodded slowly. "Then I'll need a crew." "My crew, people I trust." "You'll have them," she said. When they returned to the main hall, the MC was announcing her name. Ethan stood at the back as Lauren walked to the stage, her heels soundless on the marble. She took the microphone and the room hushed beneath the glimmering lights. She spoke of her father's legacy of privilege and responsibility of turning resources into opportunity. Then her voice shifted softer but firm. "This year, my life changed," she said, "not because of a deal or a title, but because someone reminded me what it means to be seen as a person, not as a balance sheet. He showed me that real strength isn't in what you own, but in what you build. And it's because of that, because of him, that tonight I can promise this community center will become a reality." The applause swelled like a wave, but Lauren's gaze found only Ethan standing tall at the back of the room. And in that moment, surrounded by chandeliers and whispers of wealth, he realized she hadn't just invited him into her world. She had given him a place to stand in it. The move happened quietly without champagne or ribbon cutings, just a moving truck rattling down a tree-lined street in Lincoln Park, and boxes stacked high in the back of Ethan's pickup. The house wasn't grand. 3 bedrooms, a porch with peeling paint, a yard big enough for Mia to run without bumping into walls. But the moment Lauren stepped inside, she whispered, "This feels like us." A month later, the place had begun to take on their fingerprints. Ethan had patched the loose boards on the porch himself, his tools scattered like old friends across the lawn. Lauren had chosen curtains with soft blues that caught the light in the mornings, while Mia had declared one corner of her room a future space station, complete with glow-in-the-dark stars. There was a swing now hanging from the porch beam. Ethan had built it one Saturday, Mia handing him nails as if she were his apprentice. That spring afternoon, the sky stretched wide and clear, the kind of blue that begged for kites. Mia darted across the grass, clutching the string as her bright red kite lifted higher and higher. She laughed so hard her voice carried down the block, pure and unguarded. Ethan leaned against the porch post, arms folded, watching her with a look that was equal parts pride and disbelief. Pride at the girl she was becoming. Disbelief at how far they had come to land in this yard, on this street, in this life. Beside him, Lauren sat on the porch steps, a glass of lemonade in her hand, condensation dripping down onto the wood. She was barefoot, her hair loose from its usual braid, her eyes soft as they followed Mia's every leap and stumble. "She looks free," Lauren murmured, as if afraid to break the spell. Ethan nodded. "She is more than I ever thought she'd get to be." The wind tugged at the kite string and Mia shouted, "Daddy, look, it's almost touching the clouds." Ethan chuckled, calling back, "Hold on tight, kiddo. Don't let it carry you away." Lauren laughed, her shoulder brushing his as she leaned closer. "You still think about the night on the beach every time I see her smile like that," Ethan admitted. "Back then it was just survival. Me and her against the world." Now he glanced down at Lauren, his voice dropping. "Now it feels like a life." She reached for his hand, weaving her fingers through his. "Not perfect," she said softly. Not perfect, he agreed, squeezing her hand, but ours. The screen door creaked open behind them, the faint smell of pancakes lingering from breakfast. Mia's laughter rose again as the kite swooped, the string tangling around her arms until she fell back into the grass, giggling. Lauren set down her glass, standing to brush the dirt from Mia's jeans, while Ethan came over to untangle the line. It was clumsy, messy, full of little interruptions. Yet somehow, it was exactly right. As the sun dipped lower, painting the sky in shades of gold, the three of them sat together on the porch, the kite resting limp in the yard. There were no chandeliers here, no marble floors, no polished crowds, just a swing creaking gently, a glass of lemonade growing warm, and the sound of a child's contented sigh. Ethan looked from Mia to Lauren, his heart settling into something steady, something he hadn't dared believe in. Happiness, he realized, wasn't in the grand moments. It was in the small ones. Porch swings, messy sandwiches, a kite against the sky, and sitting there with the two people who had become his world. He knew without a doubt that it was enough. Sometimes the most extraordinary stories aren't about wealth or grandeur. In the heartwarming tale of Ethan, a single dad whose simple act of kindness on Cannon Beach saved not just a stranger's life, but sparked an extraordinary journey of love and belonging, we uncover a profound life lesson. True happiness blooms not from wealth or grandeur, but from the quiet, authentic connections we forge in our most vulnerable moments. Ethan, burdened by the weight of raising little Mia alone after her mother's abandonment, could have walked away from the drowning woman Lauren, a billionaire heiress disguised in her solitude. Yet, his instinctive CPR and protective embrace opened doors to a world where mismatched wine glasses, burnt grilled cheeses, and kite-flying afternoons became the foundation of a family. This story tugs at our hearts, reminding us that life's richest treasures often arrive unannounced, wrapped in humility and grit. Lauren, drowning not only in the waves but in the isolation of her inherited fortune, found salvation in Ethan's unpretentious world, where love wasn't measured by bank accounts but by shared laughter, bedtime stories, and the willingness to show up day after imperfect day. It's a poignant nudge that we all carry unseen scars, from lost loved ones to unspoken loneliness, and that one compassionate act can rewrite destinies, turning strangers into soulmates and fragmented lives into wholesome homes. In a world obsessed with material success, this narrative whispers that vulnerability is our greatest strength, urging us to embrace the ordinary magic around us, a child's giggle, a hand to hold, or a porch swing under the stars. It evokes tears of recognition for who hasn't yearned for that sense of being truly seen. As Ethan's toolbox proposal symbolizes, enduring love is built with steady hands and open hearts, proving that second chances aren't fairy tales. They're real, raw, and reachable. If this story stirred your soul, reflecting your own experiences of unexpected grace or simple joys, share your thoughts in the comments below. What moment in your life taught you that love conquers all? And don't forget to hit subscribe for more inspiring tales of hope, resilience, and the beauty of everyday miracles that remind us we're never truly alone. Let's keep the conversation going. Your story might just inspire someone else.